Hey guys, Constance here. Welcome back to A Good Life Farm. So it has been quite a while since I've done a front porch chat, and I actually had something that I've been wanting to share with you for ages now. I just have not had an opportunity to sit down and film it. And that is actually something that I discovered in the Bible that absolutely blew my mind. So those of you who are newer here or don't know some of my backstory, I have been a believer, a Christian since, 1996, I would say. That is when I began my journey as a believer, and really it is a journey. It is not something that you have ever arrived at. Nobody has. Not until the day the Lord calls you home or comes to get you. It is a journey. We are constantly learning. We are constantly studying. We are constantly seeking more wisdom from the Lord. And so I would say that my journey began back then. And I'm very much a studier. When there is a tradition, I want to know where that tradition came from. When there is a teaching, I want to know the source. I'm the person who fact checks news stories that my friends share on social media because I want to know if it's real. I'm that person. I have a thirst for knowledge, have really my whole life, and when it comes to my faith, I'm no different. I'm constantly seeking, constantly learning, constantly studying. And I will say that in the past few years, really probably since moving out here to the homestead, I have studied the scriptures more than I ever have in my life. You know, there is just something about living this lifestyle, the simpleness of it, that brings you back to the basics. And you know, that's been part of my tagline for my channel and my website for some time, about homesteading, home cooking, back to basics. And there's nothing more back to basics than getting your hands in the soil and spending that time in God's creation and learning more about Him. So I have learned and studied more in the past few years since moving out here than ever before. And I've always been a studier. And you know, it kind of goes through seasons a little bit where you study it more times than others, but you know, since we moved here, it's been full on, full throttle. And not too long ago, I learned about something, a tradition of sorts. And once I learned about this tradition, I realized, oh my word, this tradition is all throughout the Bible. It was like, I mean, I got goosebumps. And when I shared this with friends of mine who didn't know about this either, they got goosebumps. It was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I didn't see this, and now I understand what this is talking about. And that is a wedding. There is a wedding. And I know that if you are a Christian, you know about how the church is called the bride of Christ, and we have that little bit of understanding. But once you understand the Hebrew wedding, it brings it is just like, I mean, it's flabbergasting. I mean, it's unbelievable. So I dove into the Hebrew wedding tradition and the stages that it went through. And you know, and you can see it all throughout the Bible. Once you understand it, oh well, this is where they're doing this, and oh, they're doing that, and it's amazing. It's amazing. And so I'm going to take you, I have I'm a note taker, and so this is one of my many notebooks, and this one specifically has all of my notes on the Hebrew wedding tradition, the steps, the process that traditionally would have been gone through during these times. And so I'm going to take you through them, and now if you are a believer, if you are a Christian, and you don't really know much about the Hebrew tradition of the wedding, I'm telling you, your mind's going to be blown like mine was. And I will give you a couple resources at the end of this video where you can study more. Now, I have touched on in the past about why I think it is important to understand the culture of when the Bible was written, because it gives you a broader understanding of what they're talking about, and this to me is like the perfect example of that. So I'm just going to touch on some of these basics, and now I am not an expert on this and I am still learning. And like I said at the beginning, we're always learning. So I'm just going to go through some of these and just kind of run through it very quickly. So in the beginning, well, first of all, there's 3 stages to the wedding, and I'm probably going to completely butcher the pronunciation of these, but I'll put the words down on the screen for you. First, there is the shikutin, the matchmaking stage. The second stage is the erusin, the betrothal. And then the third stage is the nisuin, the marriage. So there's 3 different stages to the process. So the shidduchin, there's several examples of this mentioned throughout the scriptures, and once you hear these, you're going to recognize them. So when you're reading the Bible, you're going to know them when you see them. Now, traditionally, marriages were often arranged. They were an agreement between families. In some cultures, this is still the practice today. The love sentimentality was something that came later through the relationship between the two, but the arrangement was made at the beginning. The fathers are the ones who would make the decision as to who was the appropriate match. Now, sometimes there would be someone who was appointed as the matchmaker that wasn't the father, and there's examples of that, like when Abraham sent his servant to go and get a bride for his son. So you see examples of that, but generally it was the father's responsibility to choose the bride for his son. Now, the father of the bride and the father of the groom, they would do the deliberating, the coming to an agreement. The groom would take part, but generally it was the fathers who made the ultimate decision as to whether it was a match or not. And this match was never forced. It was never a forced marriage. They would make the arrangements, they would make the decision, but ultimately the bride and the groom still had to agree to do this. So that's the part that would come first, the matchmaking stage. Next is the erusin, and this is the betrothal. And again, this is a process, okay? So first of all, you have the terms of marriage. The terms of marriage were written in a ketubah, and this ketubah was a legally binding document. And the purpose of the ketubah was to protect the bride. A good father would use his wisdom and his knowledge and his understanding of his daughter to make sure that this ketubah contained everything needed to protect his daughter in this marriage. The ketubah was basically the vows of the betrothal. It had the conditions and requirements for each, the bride and the groom. So what belonged to the bride, what her belongings were, the inventory of her estate, that was all part of this ketubah. It was all documented in this record. It's almost like a prenup before there was such a thing. But her belongings, what she was bringing to the marriage, was written in this. The next part of it was the bride price. The groom would have to pay a price to the family of the bride because the family was losing a daughter. They were losing someone who participated in the household. And so the groom would have to pay a price for his bride. So the marriage was an agreement not just between the individuals, but between the whole families. And again, there's a lot more details to this. I'm just kind of touching on the highlights of it. Then there were the gifts that the groom would give to the bride. The groom would give the bride gifts to show his affection to her, to show his commitment to her, a sign of his promise to her that he was going to come get her to be his wife when the time came for the marriage. And again, all of this was done with the father of the groom and the father of the bride. The groom would participate, but it was the fathers who would ultimately make all of these decisions. But it was the fathers who would make the decisions for the to be married couple. And then once they made all of these agreements, the groom and his father would go to the door of the bride's home where her father lived, and they would knock on the door. If the bride agreed to accept the terms of this marriage, she would open the door. Now, if she opens the door, then they would come on in. They would have a meal that was usually bread and wine, and it was a celebration, a commitment that the agreement had been made. So then after they had that meal, there would be a public ceremony with a ceremonial washing. A washing to show that they were engaged. Then they would have a little ceremony under a chuppah, under a canopy, and then they would sign the ketubah. They would sign this document saying that this is a contract between the bride and the groom for their future marriage. There would be 3 copies, one for the couple to keep, one for the father of the bride, and one for the judge. And that one was sealed and only the judge was allowed to open it. And so that was that. They were officially betrothed. They belonged to one another. But now the groom was going to go away. He was going to go away back to his father's home, and he would prepare a room, a place for his future bride. Because traditionally the groom and the new bride would live with the father of the groom for the first couple of years while they were kind of establishing their family. But the groom would go back to his father's place. He would make a place for his bride, a room, a home for his bride. While they were apart, he would be spending that time, preparing the place for his future bride, and she would be spending that time learning how to be a wife to her husband. She would learn all about her husband, all about his life and his tastes, and how to be a good bride to him. And there was usually someone who was appointed as a helper by the groom to the bride to teach her all about him, so that she could learn all about him, so that their future life together would be a happy one. And this time frame from the betrothal to the actual wedding would take anywhere from 1 to 2 years. Now, the groom did not know when he was going to come get his bride. Only his father knew when it was going to be time. So now, after all of this time, he's prepared his home. His father has finally decided it is time for him to go get his bride, and he would go to get her. And this stage is called the nesuin, which means to take or to lift up. And there would be a great procession with shofars or trumpets announcing that the groom is coming, the groom is coming. She would, and this would usually happen at night, she would see the lights of the procession coming at night, and she would have to go out to meet him as he came for her. But again, she never knew when he was going to come, because he never knew when he was going to come. So she had to always have oil in her lamp so that she was ready to go out and meet him, because generally it would happen at night. So she knew about when to expect him, but she never knew what day or what hour it was actually going to be. The father of the groom gave the final approval of when it was time to get his bride, and the bride kept her oil lamp ready at all times for the groom to come. Now, when he came to get his bride, he would take her back to the father's house, to the new home he had created there for her. They would consummate their marriage, and they would celebrate their marriage. So after the wedding was consummated, there would be 12 witnesses, generally 10 for the bride and 2 witnesses for the groom. And these 12 witnesses would look and say, yes, indeed, she has been faithful to her husband. And then there would be a huge celebration and a party because she's been faithful, the wedding has happened, and now it is time for them to live their life together. Like I said, this is kind of just the touching on the highlights of it, but when you listen to all of these different steps, you have salvation in the stages of the marriage because you have the price that was paid for the bride. You have the gift that is given to the bride, the helper who helps her learn about her coming husband. I mean, you see all of these different things, and it's like, whew, it blew my mind. It really blew my mind. So that is just something that I have been wanting to share with all of you guys. And like I said, there's so much more to it. And yeah, it's pretty amazing once you begin to learn all of that, because not only is it salvation taking place in the steps of the wedding, but it's also the appointed times, the feasts, the biblical feasts. The ones that have occurred and the ones to come. So like I said, I was just kind of touching on the highlights of that. There's so many more layers to it, but if you are anything like me, I know as I was learning about this, I was seeing scripture all over the place, from salvation to the second coming. I mean, just, it was amazing. And there's lots more. Once you start learning it, you start seeing more of it, and it's just, God's word is amazing. That's all I can say. So if you would like to learn more, I can share a book that I have that I've enjoyed. I'll put a link to that down below. And then I also came across an excellent teaching on the Hebrew wedding traditions. And I think there's like 2 videos that are part of that series. I will put a link to those down below as well. I think the guy does a phenomenal job of explaining it. So yes, you have never learned all there is to know about the Bible. That's all I can say about that. There's always more to learn. So thanks for joining me out here on the front porch for a little bit of a coffee chat. My name is Constance at A Good Life Farm, and I'll talk to y'all next time.